Captains of Industry, brought to you by Airtel.
It's one of the world's most recognizable brands, undeniably. It's definitely a staple in South Africa's townships. Having won numerous Car of the Year awards, Volkswagen is not a car to be reckoned with. But as Africans become more affluent, their aspirations change. The challenge for VW, I think, is to be regarded as a premier brand and not just a car for the people. Elevating the game is David Powels, the CEO of VW South Africa. He's been there since 2007 and he's our captain of industry tonight. Thanks so much, David, for your time. I mean, the very name Volkswagen evokes a sense of nationhood, a car for the people. That's what it was designed for after the war in Europe. Is it a challenge to live up to that?
I think that's where it started. I believe that's where the brand still is, but there are a few enhancements that have come along the way. We are no longer a one product brand. When it started back in 1951 in the case of South Africa, a little bit early in the case of Germany, we were a one product brand.
The Beetle.
And if you look where we are now, we're clearly a little bit more than a one product brand. But the heart and the spirit of Volkswagen very much remains being a people's brand, a people's company, and still producing people's cars.
You still think that you're the ultimate brand, because if we look at the mantra, VW das Auto, the car, I mean, what's the value proposition there?
I think what lies behind the car is it's our strategy to have the best car in every segment of the market in which we compete. So if we talk about our entry-level offering, the Polo Vivo, our objective is to have the best A0 entry-level car in the market. With the Golf, the best A-segment car in the market. So that lies behind it.
I have to declare right now, for our viewers' sake, that I'm a VW driver. I have a VW EOS, and I have a problem in the sense that the car is technically superior to a car that I had before, which was a French convertible. But I'm not in love with my car.
Why are you not in love with it?
I feel like I had a passionate lover in my French car, and now I have just the reliable husband, the guy who just doesn't move me.
No, that's difficult to understand. The EOS has so much flair, and there are good German lovers as well.
Now let's talk about your sales in South Africa. Post-recession in general, VW's beat all expectations across the new world, in Asia and definitely in Africa. But there's still a penetration issue, I think. I see VWs in Southern Africa. I don't see them when I travel into West Africa. I definitely don't see them when I travel into Francophone Africa. Even in my recent travels to Asia, people want those other luxury brands. They want Benzes, they want Beamers. They don't want a VW.
Well, yes and no. I think if we look at the VW brand and also the VW group, we've grown our market share over the last 2-3 years. Our market share now is the highest it's ever been in history. Our market share is around about 12%. VW group brand, that includes VW, Audi, Skoda, Seat, and some of the other niche brands. So we have the highest market share we've ever had in history on a global basis, 12%. That means more than every 1 in 10 cars is a VW group product. So clearly, if one talks about certain regions of the world, our penetration rates are not as high as they are in other regions. But that's an opportunity for us, because it shows that there are still white spots. We call them white spots in the world map, where we can improve our penetration, and that's certainly part of our strategy as we move towards being...
But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with people who look at the VW and say it's high performance, it's great technically, but it doesn't speak to where we're at, our aspirations as a new kind of middle class, the elitism that people strive for?
I think in our product offering, we're now moving to the point where we have a suitable product for every part of a person's life, starting with a Polo Vivo at the entry level, and going right up to a Touareg, a top-of-the-range Passat. So I believe we're moving into the space where we have credible products in every segment and segment of the market, and we can accommodate a person through his life with the right products at the right time.
Okay, new models that speak to a changing lifestyle, but also within the VW group, we're seeing synergies and part ownership of other premier brands, Audi, Porsche, and apparently, is it Porsche or Porsche?
Porsche.
It's a big debate here. Okay, Porsche, and is it a Seat, a Spanish car? Okay, tell us how that multi-brand strategy helps you.
I think let's just explain the multi-brand strategy. The VW business started 50, 60 years ago as the Volkswagen brand. In the meanwhile, we have the Audi brand, the Seat brand, the Skoda brand. We also have Porsche, Bentley, Lamborghini, Bugatti, MAN and Scania as the 2 truck brands. So by now we have 11 brands in the stable. Most people don't actually understand that the VW group on a global level is made up of these 11 brands, some incredibly exciting brands. And that's really the one of the great inspirations in working for a group like the Volkswagen Group is the exposure to this.
You've got Bentley and you've got Porsche. I think that's fantastic.
And Lamborghini and Bugatti.
Okay, so emotionally, how does that work? Because I know that when VW acquired Porsche, for many people who love that particular sports car, it was a difficult thing for them to fathom, because already we were getting reports about concerns about the engineering being dumbed down to subscribe to VW norms and standards. And then there was this whole argument about the fact that no, the designers for Porsche will stay Porsche designers, the factories will be different, they'll be exclusive, we're not going to have any cross-pollination. I mean, that doesn't bode well for VW and how people generally see it, even if you've got the money to acquire these great luxury brands, that people don't want the VW stamp of approval. It can't be good.
I think part of the reason why VW has been successful over the last decade or two in acquiring these brands, and that these brands have grown and become more successful and even more profitable, is the fact that we allow each brand to exist in its own right.
Okay.
We find synergies where there are synergies below the line, so as to speak, but the brands, the heritage of the brand product integrity, the brand design is allowed to continue to exist. And these operations are run with a big degree of autonomy, with a lot of it independence, and really the synergies which exist that can be squeezed out in terms of business result improvement happen, but in no way which detracts from the individual identities and product identities and engineering identities of those brands. So we've been very successful at doing that. And in fact, we've been so successful that some people don't know that Bentley is owned by the Volkswagen Group.
I didn't,
and Lamborghini
but let me tell you, you've given me something to say at the next dinner party I'm going to. Manufacturing in South Africa, the environment for you, because we know that the automotive sector is regarded as a sensitive sector. It's something that the government is intent on protecting. Those jobs are very important for South Africa. I mean, you make and build your cars in South Africa, so you're a critical component of the whole automotives manufacturing sector. Is it challenging, especially now?
For sure. Auto manufacturing in South Africa is extremely challenging. We start off, we have a very small market. So there's very little economy of scale, there's very little volume scale effect in the business, in the industry in South Africa. We have to export to get that extra volume to create the scale. Unfortunately, the export markets are largely 8,000 to 10,000 kilometers away. So it's a very tough business. On top of that, we have an industry which historically was protected. The market is now much more open, but we have lots of challenges in terms of improving the competitiveness of within the motor companies, the assemblers, but more importantly, or equally importantly, improving the competitiveness in the supply chain. Most of the value add in a car actually comes from the parts that we buy that go into the final assembly of a car. So it is very challenging, a small market, intense competition, export markets far away, a history of a closed market with protection and inefficiency, so a big challenge. But the industry is systematically working on improving its competitiveness. We have a long way to go, and that's the only way we can tackle it. You can't capitulate, you have to work on it step by step.
If you had to advise government right now on the best ways to improve on manufacturing efficiencies and competitiveness, what would you say? Because many people are saying, you know what, even if it's 1/5 of South Africa's GDP, it's not your competitive advantage. Some aspects of manufacturing have to be let go, not necessarily automotives, but you've got to do what you do well.
In principle, I agree with that, but the fact is we have an auto industry in South Africa. It's an industry that has been here for 60 years. Our company, Volkswagen, celebrates this year our 60th year of auto manufacturing in South Africa. So fact is we have this base, and before we give it up, I think we have to really give it a full go at trying to optimize it. We need the jobs. One thing which I think is maybe underestimated in the auto sector is the job multiplier effect that it has in an economy. You can't just look at the jobs created directly by an auto assembly plant or the supply chain. You need to look at the second tier suppliers, the third tier suppliers, all the small companies that supply various services to an automotive company. There's a whole industry that supports the automotive industry. So it has an important job multiplier effect, and I think in the framework of the massive unemployment that we have in the country, we really have to work hard, a little bit longer at trying to become globally competitive before we give it up.
Do all VW shareholders share in this developmental approach that you're advancing? Because I know that when there were some real challenges, for instance, on government import tariffs, labor being so belligerent and high wages, some manufacturers are saying, you know what, it's probably better to move the operations across borders, maybe countries like Botswana or Zambia. It's cheaper, and you can just import the cars to South Africa. No need for all the stress.
Clearly, the VW Group has a strong focus on cost competitiveness, quality competitiveness, and long-term sustainability. So clearly, we're under pressure, as are all the other VW operations around the world. But important is to acknowledge that the VW, or to recognize that the VW Group is a long-term player. We don't make short-term decisions, we make long-term decisions. We don't change direction hastily. And that is an advantage for us, because it gives us the time to show what we need to do and to start the journey of doing it. We're not a long-term player. We've been here for 60 years. We hope to be manufacturing cars in another 60 years in South Africa. But it's not just that we have this dream of continuing. We have to work systematically through our business as well as through the value chain, the supply chain, to make sure that does happen. But fortunately, we are a long-term player.
What about bringing the manufacturing, the production line to the nucleus of the economy? I remember I had an accident in my VW, and no comments about my driving. And literally they had to rebuild the front of the car. But the whole process of fixing the car up took about 3 weeks, because all the composite parts had to come from Uitenhage. They had to be shipped up to Johannesburg. And I would have thought that with so many VW drivers in the center of the economic capital, it would just be easy to do it all here, but it's not being done here.
I think you're driving a niche car, so that makes repair a little bit more tricky. You're driving a car which has a very low volume imported volume into the country. So I'm sure the experience that you had would be quite different to the experience that an average VW customer has. It should not take that long to get the parts.
But taking myself out of the equation, I mean, this is the argument is, you know, a lot of the automotive players, you have an industrial zone, for lack of a better word, and then you bring the cars inland and you export them overseas. But this is also where a lot of the jobs are needed. Shouldn't you be thinking about setting up plants in main centers like Gauteng, Kimberley, I don't know?
Yeah, the investment to put up an automotive plant is extremely high and extremely prohibitive. So it's not possible to have decentralized auto manufacturing. That's not the nature of the auto sector. The auto sector requires very big investment in a very complicated process, and then volume to get the economies of scale. So what we have to, of course, work at in the auto industry is making sure that for the retail customer, we have efficient after-sales capability through the dealer network, and that's also a very strong focus point for the various brands.
Just before we go to break, obviously under your tenure a few new exciting things have happened. We've seen new models being rolled out. We've seen a paint shop valued at 750 million rands being set up. We've seen the introduction for the first time, I think, of light commercial vehicles into the market. So some fun things have happened. But I've been asked by the guys in the office to ask you, the paint shop, do you dip the cars, or do you continue to spray paint them? You can sense that I don't know what I'm talking about here, but here's the question.
Yeah, the modern paint shop process is quite a complicated process. There are some elements of the process which include dipping the car through a bath, a very big bath, with very expensive material in it, and there's some parts of the process which is application of sealer, which is done by robotics. And then finally the base coat and the top coat and the clear coat of the car, the final paint process, which is largely automated through a robotic process. So various sub-processes within the process.
I mean, the reason we're asking is because if we're sitting here trying to create jobs in South Africa, and I know that you've got to manage your costs, if you're already moving into robotic technology, it takes away from the very essence of what we're trying to do. Do you often feel that you're compromised, where you want efficiencies in the business, but you're also trying to provide solutions like you're talking about to a country?
Not really. The degree of automation of an automotive plant is determined based on various factors, labor costs, labor capability, and product-specific issues. So we have, for every country, a model which we look at, and we then determine the level of automation which is necessary. In our body shop, for example, we only have 60% automation. In body shops in Europe, they have 95% automation. So we have a pragmatic approach to it, and we look at the local circumstances and cost structures, and then determine what is the level of automation which the market requires.